This is the Patriots Prayer podcast. It's a tremendous show, one of the greatest shows in the history of the world.
This is Bryson Gray, and you are watching the Patriots Prayer.
Gather the faithful now and pray. The Patriots Prayer. The Patriots Prayer. All wicks are trimmed, oil is filled to the brim. I haven't changed yet somehow. I'm the radical now. America's falling, they all say. Gather the faithful now and pray. The Patriots Prayer. The Patriots Prayer. America's falling, they all say. Gather the faithful now and pray. The Patriots Prayer.
Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Patriots Prayer Podcast. I am your host, the Native Patriot. Eddie is not with us today. He is currently out of town doing business. So it is just me. And these three gentlemen here today, if you guys are unaware, is National Whistleblower Appreciation Day. Now, in today's discussion, we're going to go through several topics, including their journey to becoming a whistleblower, what caused them to feel the need to stand up for their country in such a way, risk everything, their lives, their livelihood, their family, and speak the truth, which is what we're actually trying to inspire everybody to do as of late. So our first guest here is Pedro Orta. He's a former CIA officer who risked it all to reveal internal misconduct, standing up against powerful forces for the sake of transparency. Our second guest, Ryan Hartwig, right beneath me. The Facebook insider who revealed the platform's questionable content moderation practices, sparking debates about free speech and tech industry ethics. And of course, Nate Cain. Part of the Patriots Prayer Network, he runs his own show. Nate, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is great to have you. If you guys are unaware, he is the whistleblower who exposed the cover-up involving Hillary Clinton, Uranium One, and election integrity, highlighting the need for reform and accountability in our government. So, if you guys are watching this on X, please join us on Rumble at the Patriots Prayer and share it with your friends. We do need subscribers to transfer over from X to Rumble as well. So if you can, please transfer over there. Thank you guys for joining on this day. Nate Cain, how are you?
I'm doing good. So, folks, we felt it was a good idea to put together something like this. A lot of folks don't have a lot of knowledge about what whistleblowing entails, and we hear all kinds of people that are called whistleblowers, and there are different. There's the Whistleblower Act, there's the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Act, and then you have folks that, like Ryan, who are in the private sector that blew the whistle on things that were corrupt and going on inside private corporations. So we got a flavor here of, former FBI whistleblower, contractor. You have a CIA whistleblower here tonight, and a private sector whistleblower. So it should be an interesting night to go through a little bit about our stories and hopefully talk about and shed some light on what it means to be a whistleblower and some of the things that maybe need to change, within our legislature to make it safer and make it more productive and hopefully promote more people, shedding light. Because right now, a lot of folks are afraid, and when I say folks, I'm talking about people who are working and seeing bad situations because they've seen what has happened to people like myself, people like Pedro, people like Ryan, and several others that we've seen, that have really had retaliation done against them. So that's hopefully the my mission tonight in asking for the show to be put together. And thank you, Maurice, for hosting it for us and for being our moderator tonight, because I know I can be a long-winded. So hopefully you can tell me to shut up at any time.
I think you're all right. Pedro, would you like to introduce yourself?
Pedro Orta, CIA whistleblower. I spent almost 19 years with the Central Intelligence Agency. Really became an accidental whistleblower. Was just doing my job. I witnessed some significant wrongdoing in a war zone as a deputy chief of base, and I reported it to the chain of command. And the short story to it is all kinds of personnel actions were taken against me. That's called whistleblower reprisal, because once you report what you reasonably believe evidence is, violations of law, waste, fraud, abuse of authority, so forth, you're protected as a whistleblower. And despite the fact that I had protections on paper, I basically ended up, being sent home, short of tour, sent back to CIA headquarters, basically blackballed. Couldn't find a job within CIA, got chased out of CIA. So I ended up taking shelter in the Office of Inspector General for the Intelligence Community. Throughout that time, eventually what would happen is the CIA IG claimed that they were investigating the reprisals I alleged. Mind you, they were 6 months late in beginning the investigation. And 2 years later, eventually they would say that they didn't find any reprisals. But the reality is they did find reprisals. They said no qualifying personal action was taken against me. And I found out that they did a shoddy investigation. And in this entire process, I ended up going back to CIA for a second round of reprisals. That's a long story. I had to write a book, The Broken Whistle, Deep State Run Amok. So I ended up going through a second stage of blowing the whistle. In that stage, basically, I was blowing the whistle on the broken whistle, on how the whistleblower protections within the intelligence community were broken. It's a long, complicated story, but the bottom line is that if you report, I can assure you that you will find yourself on the end of reprisals with the IGs not doing their job and doing complete investigations, and Congress not holding them accountable. So in my second iteration of blowing the whistle, more reprisals, Congress not interested. I ended up using the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. Congress had no interest. CIA didn't necessarily pass everything I wanted passed to Congress. The IGs were non-responsive, wouldn't investigate the second wave of reprisals, wouldn't do anything, and it led to my termination. So I was fired without any recourse, without any investigations conducted on my reprisals. And the moral of the story is, if you are an intelligence community employee or even contractor and you blow the whistle, the protections are basically just letters on paper that are unenforceable, and you won't find yourself in any situation where you can adjudicate your alleged reprisals with any chance of success.
And I think this actually expands to, I mean, in a less complicated way, but to the average citizen, that there's no room for there's no redress for grievances, right? There's no pathway to find that kind of justice or representation. And the investigation, like you had brought up, when they investigate themselves like that, they're not actually looking to find justice. In your case, it seems more so like they were, I don't want to accuse them of covering their tracks, but it kind of feels more like that, as opposed to actually handling the investigation to find the wrongdoing and to hold those accountable who did wrong.
The investigation was basically a cleanup crew to cover up the crime. For example, the main witness, I gave them their name early on in the investigation, and I followed up, like, what's the status of the investigation? Still investigating. Almost 2 years later, I finally reached out to the the main witness. And at this point in time was when I had that really strange response from the CIIG that they found no qualifying personal action. Well, when I talked to the main witness, they told me I just got a phone call where I had questions that basically required that I say yes or no. I couldn't volunteer any information. And it was obvious to me that the questions were kind of front loaded to have a predetermined outcome. And the worst part about this entire process is if you look at the law, the law specifically in this particular instance for the intelligence community is they're supposed to use the Title V standards. Section 2302B8 of Title V is what gives you basically the list of personnel actions, which was actually codified in Title 50 for the intelligence community. And in addition to that, it was backed up, first actually front-loaded by a Presidential Policy Directive 19. But the enforcement is those Title V standards of United States Statute Code law, and it's particularly two sections, 1214 and 1221. And it explicitly tells you that if you claim reprisals, the moment you report reprisals to an IG, within 2 weeks, they're supposed to get back to you and let you know whether there's cause to investigate a reprisal or not. And if there's cause to investigate a reprisal, from the moment you report it to the moment of the investigation being complete, they have 240 days. In this entire process, should they need more time, they need to communicate with you saying why they need more time. But even before you get to 240 days, they're supposed to give you status updates every 90 days. And the most important part is it's supposed to be a collaborative process in which there's dialogue between the complainant and the IG. And, the IG is supposed to be like an inquisitor. They're supposed to leave no stone unturned. They're supposed to go out and fact find and find everything. It's not necessarily upon the whistleblower to let them know what to look for. The whistleblower tells them what the reprisal is and what potentially to look for. But the IGs are supposed to leave no stone unturned and find everything. What I found,
the most interesting part about that is that you're supposed to be one of them. Right? You're on their team, and they're supposed to be protecting you as if you're one of them. But it sure seems like as soon as you expose something, truthful as it is, they see you as an enemy. And instead of following the rules in place and the processes that we've had on the books that if we're only followed could handle this problem, instead of doing that, they're obfuscating their duty and treating you as if you're the enemy, basically.
Basically what happens is these agencies go into defense mode. They want to defend themselves from any potential liabilities. They merely go into cover-up mode, and they can find every creative way imaginable to cover their tracks. So yes, they see you as the enemy because you have exposed their wrongdoing. And in the process of exposing their wrongdoing, what they want to do is they want to cover up that wrongdoing and make believe it never happened or clean it up in a way that it never happened. Seldom do you ever find a government agency that will say, we really messed up. We got a problem here. We need to fix this.
We investigated ourselves and found nothing.
Yeah, it's basically like the mafia investigating itself. They'll always say we found nothing wrong.
Yep. Okay, Ryan, I know you've been sitting quietly there. Thank you for patiently waiting your turn here. I know that there's a lot to get to here, but you are in kind of a different atmosphere as Nate and Pedro are, because you're in a private sector and you whistleblew on Facebook.
That's correct. Yeah. So I exposed Facebook. I went public in 2020. And the interesting thing about the whole thing is that I was an entry level employee. So I wasn't this top level engineer or anything. I was making $15 an hour as a content moderator, subcontracted by Facebook. So I was working for Cognizant Technology Solutions. I started in March of 2018. And interestingly enough, a month after I started there, which I found out later, Mark Zuckerberg testified before Congress that Facebook does not censor political speech, right? So I went in there, I needed a job, and so I started there, and then I noticed how they were really concerned about what was happening in the U.S. and they just hired a bunch of moderators in at our location in Phoenix, and we're onboarding like crazy because before it happened overseas. And so I'm looking at election content, I'm looking at stuff in Latin America, and I'm like, why are they training us on how to enforce election content and like in the US and Canada? Why, we had election training decks. And then I later found out, and this is interesting, we have the CIA here, whistleblower here, because we had election training decks for pretty much for most countries in the world, for Taiwan, Poland. Like we're enforcing election law in Spain, Colombia, throughout the world. So it really, once you put the pieces together, you're like, okay, why are they so involved? So I started making my own little list, like, okay, why they made these exceptions. Hey, let's allow attacks against straight white males. Let's allow attacks against, people on the right. It was pretty clear they had an agenda. So I made a list. I sent a letter to a few people in the Senate. I think Marsha Blackburn, my congressperson at the time. But I didn't really, I waited maybe a month or two. I'm not sure. Didn't really hear anything. And then I'm like, okay, this needs to get out. So I reached out to a few journalists, ended up with Project Veritas, went public in June. I went in 2019 is when I reached out. And then Project Veritas contacted me. They sent me a hidden camera. I started filming. I filmed for about 9 months straight. And this was a facility where it was actually, the security was actually pretty tight. Like we had this shortly after I started filming, another journalist had with the Verge had talked about Facebook in our location. So we actually had to and they accidentally doxed us. And we're here deleting like terrorist content right on Facebook. And it's like, okay, they brought in Pinkerton security. So I had armed guards at all the doors, and then no papers at all were allowed inside the facility. So that was those are the circumstances under which I was filming with the hidden camera pretty much on a daily basis
so
I would say, yeah.
Really quick, what made you feel compelled to start meticulously documenting what you see? Because not a lot of people get that. A lot of people will have that feeling and then just let it go by, or they will play along and kind of ignore that feeling. What compelled you specifically to start recording this? Because you had that feeling that, okay, something's wrong. They're not telling us the truth.
Yeah, one specific instance that really caught my attention, that compelled me, was how they were treating like white males. Like it's okay to call white males and straight white males as filth. And then also there was a post about a bookstore. Like they said there are nationalists protesting at a bookstore. They didn't say white nationalists, just nationalists are protesting at a bookstore. So that really caught my attention. And the sheer scale of it. So you've got the largest company in the world, one of the largest social media companies in the world, targeting right-wing content. And there's even examples of them, examples of far-right extremism. So yeah, those are a few examples, like targeting straight white males, targeting nationalists, which is now a bad word, I guess. And and just going after the right, just pretty blatantly and obviously. A few, like when I first got hired in the training, I had a couple red flags where they were talking about how much the trainer was talking about how much she loved Obama. Obama was her Patronus charm. So like, but 6 months down the road, I guess I heard that, and then 6 months down the road, I'm seeing all this training content and exceptions to target conservatives, and that's what compelled me, was just the sheer scale of it. I mean, we're deleting thousands and thousands of posts a day, and Facebook they're pretty clear about their intent, their desire to influence the election.
See, and I think that's probably the most interesting part. And one thing that I actually wanted to highlight with all three of you guys is the ability, the courage to speak up and I guess document those things when you have that bad feeling and you understand that, hey, something's wrong here and nobody's doing anything about it. Why not me? Right? Because there are definitely consequences. And this is actually something that I would like to get into, is that the consequences are not always, they're not always instant, but I guess you guys felt it better to call this out and face the consequences rather than sit by and have the guilt of your inaction cause whatever mayhem they're actually doing down the road. Because when you feel compelled to do something like this, you three men were able to act on it in a way that is pretty unique. And I just wanted to tip, if I had a hat, I'd tip it to you guys. And yeah, I mean, this is part of the National Whistleblower Appreciation Day right now. Almost nobody I know knows about this because there's a holiday for everything, but there's also a reason for it. And something like National Whistleblower Appreciation Day should be highlighted a little bit more, because this can change the course of history when you highlight the evils of, whether it be the CIA or Facebook. I mean, these are not insignificant companies or insignificant institutions. These are institutions that will change the course of history, and one person can change that by exposing what they're doing. So I just wanted to give little hats off to you. And I guess, Nate, if you wanted to explain your story a little bit to everybody so they can kind of get a grip of it, and then I guess explain a little bit of the consequences that came down the road from those decisions that you had made.
So I was working at the FBI as a cybersecurity subject matter expert. I had left my career as a government employee, where I was at Marfor Cyber on a cyber protection team, and had been read on to surveillance authorities, intelligence authorities, all of that kind of stuff. And so, I had a pretty decent knowledge of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate in terms of targeting and that sort of thing. But what ended up happening was I've had a top secret clearance for over 27 years, and no time in that 27 years have I gone looking into things that I didn't have a need to know or that was not part of my job. But during my time at the FBI, I came into work one day and I overheard a conversation that I wish I hadn't heard, where somebody was talking about evidence that the FBI had on Hillary Clinton, that was related to money laundering, public corruption, securities and exchange fraud, terrorism financing, evidence of something so big, and this is their words, something so big that it could bring down the government. And apparently there was a conversation that had happened with senior members of the FBI. We called them, those that were on the 7th floor. And they were discussing their investigation of Hillary Clinton, and were talking about what they were going to do about it. And everybody believed Hillary Clinton was going to be president, and they were afraid of reprisal themselves. So they decided, rather than doing their job and, fulfilling their oath to the Constitution, they decided that they were going to cover up these crimes and cover up Hillary Clinton, basically shut down the investigation and cover everything up. And so when I first heard this, I thought, I didn't know whether it was rumor or not. I had a very positive opinion of the FBI, although ironically, I did see a lot of bias and pro-Obama bias at the Washington office, at the FBI. But it didn't really bother me. I mean, I kind of kept to myself on that. But when I decided to look into it, because I couldn't just sit by and ignore it, I had access to the FBI Net database. So I logged into it. I went in, I looked, I did some searches, and lo and behold, I found a treasure trove of evidence and files and what they call suspicious activity reports that had been reviewed by FinCEN and sent to the FBI. And the FBI had already given these thorough looking at and analyst notes, and had a high probability of criminal activity. And these had case numbers, and they were with 3 separate field offices. So I thought, well, there's no way they're going to make this go away. They've got open cases on it. So I thought it was just rumor, but there was something in me that just said, I don't know if I trust everything that's going on. So I had my government computer there, it was on the classified network. So I just copied some of those files over and put them on my government, machine, my government workstation. And then I decided I would just sit on it and see what happens. It wasn't much longer after that of course, there was the big scandal regarding the email server. And an FBI director at the time, Comey, went before the J. Edgar Hoover building and basically gave this long speech about how all these classified emails were found on this server in the basement bathroom of Hillary Clinton's, home in Chappaquiddick. And so I'm thinking, oh wow, he's mentioned that they had 7 email chains that had special access programs, which, for those that don't know classification, a SAP is basically, it's above top secret. It's top secret, but it's got special compartmentalized information, and you don't get to see it even if you have a top secret unless you've been read onto that program. So it's stuff that can bring grave damage to the United States. Usually stuff that can cost people their lives. And so they found 7 of these on her personal server. Now, I've worked around classified data, like I said, for 27 years. There's no way you are getting a SAP out of a SCIF without knowingly violating the rules and violating the law. So I'm thinking, oh, they're going to arrest her. They're going to announce an indictment against her right now. They talked about thousands of, there were thousands of emails that were secret, and they had 7 special access programs that were, top secret and above. And then he goes on to say, but no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against her. And I thought, whoa, oh my gosh, did I just hear correctly? Because just that same month, they had put a sailor away for, I think he got several years for doing nothing more than taking a picture of his hot rack on a submarine. And, it was a big scandal because basically the hot rack itself wasn't classified, but you weren't authorized to take pictures inside the sub at all. And so they basically threw the book at this guy.
He had shared the photo on social media, correct?
That's right. And it was just a picture of their bedding.
Yeah, this is the discrepancy between somebody like the Clintons and a regular, average, everyday citizen.
Exactly.
And just the fact that 2-tier justice system, and especially when Comey had come out and he had... I still remember that hearing like it was yesterday when they basically said that there wasn't intent there, right? It was just a whoopsie-daisy, and no reasonable prosecutor would go after this case, which in all reality, this is probably one of those scenarios where it should have been the highest priority to go after it.
Yeah, they had a solid case against her on the email server alone, not to mention all the other stuff that they were investigating from 3 separate field offices. So at that point, I knew that the rumors that they were going to cover up everything were true. And I'll be honest, I didn't go through and take steps right away. I mean, this was a serious decision to make. I knew this is the kind of decision that would be a career ender. I knew it was the kind of decision that, I could get set up and put into jail. It was the kind of decision that could honestly get me killed. You're talking about the Clintons here. And so I ended up going and I only had one option to legally blow the whistle. I had only one policy, path, if you will. And that was to blow the whistle utilizing the ICWPA, which is the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act, because that's the only one that a contractor can use. They're not afforded whistleblower protection under the Whistleblower Protection Act. And I also knew that I could not go through the normal chain of command, which would have been to go to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, who was at the time a man by the name of Michael Atkinson. The reason I couldn't go through it is because on the stuff that was being investigated about Hillary Clinton, a lot of it related to Uranium One. And there had been investigations done on Uranium One, and the people that were involved in those investigations were Michael Atkinson. It was also Rod Rosenstein, who was the U.S. or he was the attorney for U.S. Attorney for Maryland at the time. It was also Robert Mueller, who at the time of the investigation was the FBI director. It was also Comey, who was the deputy director at that time. So basically my entire chain of command, from the deputy AG all the way, through the ranks of the FBI senior leadership and the intelligence community IG. They were all connected. So I was in a real bind, and I honestly didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to keep my head down. And I mean, I had the best job. I had most money I was ever making. I was, basically had an easy job. I just came and managed some servers, and, and there was not a whole lot being asked of me. They were slow walking my project. And all I had to do was keep my mouth shut, and I could have continued to make lots of money. But I went, I remember going home the day after that, or, right after that announcement. And I had not said anything to my wife about what I had found. But I realized at that point I needed to talk to her. And so she, I was kind of being quiet and laying in bed, and she looks at me and goes, what's going on with you? Why are you so quiet? And I said, I think I'm going to have to blow the whistle on the FBI. And she sat up in bed and goes, what? And, and she said, why does it have to be you? And I said, because who else is it going to be? You think anybody else is going to throw their career away? And I had one thing that was going for me that I guess compelled me, and that was my faith in God. I believed that ultimately someday I'm going to stand before God, and I'm going to be held accountable for the things that I did, but not just the things that I did, but also for the good that I could have done that I chose not to do. And so at that point, I made the decision to go through and blow the whistle. Now, I was very naive. I didn't really, know, how to protect myself in this situation, but I was also not a fool. And so I reached out through another individual, a YouTuber actually by the name of Bill Still, who had a show called a podcast called the Still Report, and he made contact through a person that he knew. He made contact with the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, because I looked at the law, and the law was clear. The only people who could take classified documents without any questions outside of the IG was a senior staffer with either of the two intel committees. And so I decided to go directly to him, but I had to go through it in a kind of a very clandestine way. So we had a clandestine meeting. I briefed the senior staffer to Devin Nunes, who was the chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And after that briefing, he said, I need you to go back in and get some more information. And so I didn't want to, but I did. And I came back out with an intelligence report that showed what the FBI knew and when they knew it. And then I got cut off from comms when I came back out with the information, and I got no response back when I tried to reach out to them through a encrypted software that he had given me. So at that point, that's when I had to get a lawyer, and I had to actually lawyer up and go through the process utilizing the ICWPA. We decided not to go through the normal chain of going to the ICIG, and we said went to the Department of Justice, Inspector General Michael Horowitz. In fact, I was the first ever whistleblower to ever use the ICWPA with the Department of Justice. So I was kind of their first case ever, seeing somebody like me. I was granted anonymity.
Hey Nate, can you give us kind of a time frame, like the years that happened? What year was it you decided you had that conversation with?
So I started my whistleblowing on October 31st, because I remember, it was Halloween. October 31st, 2017 was when I brought the information out and met at the Botanical Gardens with Devin Nunes, a senior staff member, and we drove around, and I debriefed him for about 3 hours.
2017. And so, yeah, and just to give, I'm sorry to interrupt, just like, I don't think people realize how much of a torturous process this is for whistleblowers, even more so for government whistleblowers.
Yeah. And I mean, I sat on this data.
Yeah.
I sat on this data for almost a year because there were things that, I needed to figure out how to do this in a way and not get myself killed. So there was a lot of planning and a lot of, working through people to set up meetings and things like that. And
but doesn't the government know everything? Doesn't the government know anything? Like, I'm surprised. I'm actually still surprised that people like you and me, my stuff maybe is important, but the type of your stuff you were dealing with was very sensitive. So I'm kind of surprised with Pedro as well. You watch these spy movies and it's like, you think you assume the government knows everything and they know a lot. I'm surprised that you're still with us today, with the scale of what you uncovered. So,
Well, I had a couple close calls, and I think by God's grace, I'm still here. But in the end, when I came back out and I went through this process with the IG, I will give credit to Michael Horowitz. He did a stand-up job in protecting me. He allowed me anonymity. They gave me a code name, MC Poda. My lawyer actually picked that name, and I asked him, I said, why didn't you pick something cooler like, 008, You had to pick MC Poda. What does that even mean? And, I'm only going to do this once in my life. And so he picked that name. He goes, oh, no, you'll like it. And he was a Cuban immigrant, came over here on asylum with his father when he was 14 or something like that. So he had a total hatred of communists. And he goes, oh, I think you'll like MC Poda. I go, well, what does it even mean? He goes, making communists pay out the ass. And I said, all right, I love that name. I'm owning that name. So, but
all right.
But yeah, so it took, so from the point, October was when I blew the whistle in 2017. And then I ended up, when is Trump's birthday? Was it in June or July, I think? So it was the following year. It took almost a year it took a good amount of time after that to get things set up with the IG. We had to go through this process, and this is where, Pedro was talking about there's amount of time that they have, right? So the process, lawyer contacted them. It took a while to get things up. They had to agree that going to be given anonymity. They had to agree that I was not going to, they were not going to talk to me, not going to interview me, but that they were going to by our rule. And so my lawyer set things. So we ended up meeting. I went to St. John's Episcopal Church, the Church of the Presidents, which is right across from the White House. And I went in there wearing a hoodie and sunglasses and a hat and, all cloak and dagger like. And I sat in the front pew, and my lawyer and I prayed. And then he went out and made the phone call. And, that was really the moment of truth, whether, they were going to come arrest me or whether they were going to honor our deal. And so at that point, Horowitz's senior deputy came to, the church. He was escorted in and was walked up to right behind me on my left shoulder. And they had asked me to print out the entire set of documents, over 458 pages. So I had it in a double wrapped envelope, and he stood behind me, and I handed him the package as soon as I was tapped on the shoulder. I didn't want them catching my voice imprint. I didn't want them getting any cameras on me. I didn't want any fingerprints. I was wearing gloves. Everything I did, meticulously to, try to protect my identity. And then it went through it. That started the ball rolling. Jeff Sessions refused to give it a credibility rating, which he was required by law to do so as the AG. But he refused because he was recusing himself from all things Russia and Hillary Clinton. So it sat on his desk, and the 21-day period passed that they were supposed to have reviewed it, and we ended up 30 days. And my lawyer contacted the office and, hey, what's going on? And so they told us, and the IG had said, this is unprecedented. The law is that he's supposed to, to give it a credibility rating. He goes, but he's saying he won't. So are you willing? And the deputy AG couldn't do it because he was implicated. So he said, are you willing to allow me as the IG to give it a credibility rating? To which we said, yes. So then that process finished. And then we were given authorization to take it to both the House and Senate Intel committees. But when my lawyer reached out to the House Intel committee, they said, is your client willing to testify? To which I said, not no, but hell no. Because I knew the moment I was in a hearing, closed or open, doesn't matter. The Democrats would leak my name, and it would probably get me killed, because this information dealt with Russian intelligence assets, as well as Hillary Clinton and all of her pals in foreign states, many of which are not our allies but are adversarial. I mean, this was some heavy duty stuff. And so they said, well, we're not going to take it if your client doesn't testify, which, was also kind of crazy, because it had already been validated and verified, given credibility by the IG. In fact, so much so that they wouldn't take it from me. But when we went back to the IG said, ask them if they'll take it if I deliver it, to which they agreed to that. So the IG delivered it through his deputy to both the House and Senate Intel committees. And then I was done, and I kind of washed my hands of it, and I went home. I knew that at some point I would probably have FBI showing up at my house, but I at least got the information into the hands of, the House and Senate. And
that's probably the most cloak and dagger thing I've heard. Like I've seen spy movies, but they really should make a movie about your story, Nate. And I'm sure Pedro here has had examples of that.
It'd probably be easier to do than a book, because I'm sure there's no way in hell they would ever approve my book through pre-publication review.
Yeah, you might just self-publish, but we need to make that documentary. For me, I talked to my wife, made the decision to film, and then I would, wire up usually at home, put the camera on, and then I remember going to the bathroom and like looking in the mirror, like, can I see the camera? And then one time we were out, like, it was like, it was a younger crowd. Like most of the people there were in their early 20s at Facebook or Cognizant. And so we, like one time we were outside, we were there playing like Three Flies Up, or playing with the ball, playing catch with the ball. And they wanted me to play. And so I'm like running around, and I'm not going to disclose where the battery was, but I had a pretty decent sized battery pack on me. I had it strapped to me somewhere. And so I was like, oh no, it's going to fall. Maybe the battery's going to fall out. But a lot of it was, I was just talking to my friends. Like I'd made friends at work, so I was just talking to them about different things that, different questions about policy I had. Talking to my supervisor, so I'd go up and start a conversation and film them. And it was. There's a movie called The Informant with Matt Damon, and it always reminds me of that because he exposed the lysine fixing scandal in the early mid 90s. And he was an FBI informant, and it really like wreaks a lot. It really affects your psyche. I'm sure you both have experienced like the mental anguish or just the mental.
Well, that's right? One of the things that happened was that 4 months after I completed my disclosures and I thought I was done and I could breathe again, that's when everything went south, because the Democrats took over the House, which meant that Devin Nunes was out. All they had to do was then take those files that they had received, leak those back to the FBI. Then the FBI could go and look at who pulled those files, because I didn't erase any of my tracks, because that would have been illegal. And so 4 months later, the FBI raided my home with 16 agents, just totally disrupted. I lost my job at the VA because I had moved on to the VA. And then one agent in particular, made it his personal mission to try to destroy my life. And so he went after me. And by the way, there is a documentary that's coming out that has several of us whistleblowers in there, and I talk about that to some degree. And that Pedro had helped get me involved in that, but that's with Frank Panico. And so I definitely that's coming out. When is that, Pedro? In September?
We're working on a release date, tentatively scheduled for 17 September, and that's depending on film premieres. Maybe a live private screening film premiere, still to be worked out. Also looking at distribution channels. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's doing an independent film has its challenges. So working it out.
But that's more of like a documentary, where each of us is kind of telling a little bit of our story of how we were, abused by the system. And so I definitely recommend people check that out. But in the end, all of my kids were affected. I've had to pay thousands of dollars of therapy sessions because of PTSD for, my kids, my wife. I think I've dealt with it probably better than anybody, mainly because I was forced to go public and talk about it. And there's something about talking about it that's like liberating, that kind of frees you from the fear. And, you drip out a little bit more each time that you do an interview. Well, I've done hundreds of interviews now, and that's probably why I'm able to even talk about it today, because it was traumatizing. There's no doubt about it.
I think when our founding fathers created this country, they in a way had a similar experience in that they were trying to address the problems in a civil way, in the right way, where there's already a way to handle these things, and they're writing letters to the king and basically pleading that, you know, these are wrong, and this is where we're going to draw the line. And in a lot of ways, the way that you guys were exposing this corruption is yes, it's in the right way, and going and doing the whistleblower route, where you kind of have to get the information out there. Right now, I'm not saying that it's a direct comparison, but Benjamin Franklin said that our government was created as a republic if we can keep it. And so each and every single one of us holds that responsibility. Our civic duty is to uphold the Constitution and the American way, right? So we have all of that. We were raised with all of that in our hearts. And it seems that there's a lot of people nowadays that have lost their way, and the corruption has gotten extremely deep. And it's going to take more than 3 whistleblowers or 4 whistleblowers. It has to be a movement, and I hope that you guys telling your story and the fact that you have endured, and I mean, I would imagine that Pedro, how do you feel today knowing that you had to go through what you had to go through? Is this something that is more fulfilling because you know that you did the right thing regardless of the consequences that came after, because you did it truthfully and honestly?
My case began February of 2015, and it stretched all the way into September of 2019. And again, accidental whistleblower. I was just doing my job, and I was determined to do what was right because I was taught as a child, do what is right. Integrity, honor, respect. I grew up in such an environment, and it impacted me for the rest of my life. And working in the national security field, I mean, where else can you expect the highest levels of integrity? I mean,
That's supposed to be the highest form of patriotism, is serving your country in that way.
Well, I mean, we're talking about lives, and the CIA clandestine ops. Mistakes can cost lives of assets, lives of our fellow employees, the lives of our fellow citizens, as we witnessed with 9/11. So, I mean, national security work demands the highest level of integrity. So, I went in with that perspective, and when I had to report and stay with it, no matter how much abuse I had to put up with, I persisted in maintaining the red line of, this is the truth, this is right, this is wrong, and come what may, I'm here to stay, and I'm going to do what is right. And I have no regrets about that, but I certainly have paid a price. I mean, it's been a long journey. I'm still literally recuperating from it. My family has suffered, particularly a 14-year-old daughter, the most, who lives in a foreign country. And that's a result of the consequences of a marriage that fell apart as a result of, the things we went through. But at the end of the day, the accountability, what I have found is that we really have more of a crisis of accountability in society, and particularly in governance and even in the private sector, Facebook, where people think they can do wrong. And if they do wrong, if they think it's right, they will continue to do wrong. And if you dare to speak up, truth to power, they will do anything that they can to destroy you. And unfortunately, what I have found is that crisis of accountability is actually growing from a perspective that, people have almost no ability to speak up. If you speak up, likely find yourself alone with nobody helping you. I have found very few to almost none willing to back me up in any form, in any shape. As I went through this entire process, I can count the number of CIA officers or intelligence community officers who offered a lending hand or did anything to help, for the most part, I was basically isolated to the
Mhm.
point that, eventually, as I was going through this reprisal investigation process or reprisal complaint process, I was a year shy of retirement. I basically told them, why not just let me take a year of leave without pay and let me retire after my year and just move on? Because there was no way really I can stay in there in that environment.
At the southern border right now, there's a lot of, I've seen some interviews with border agents where they basically say that they know that they're knowingly trafficking women and children
Mhm.
into sex slavery or into sweatshops. And I feel that I'm having a hard time understanding why there aren't more whistleblowers coming out about that. Why there isn't a ton of panic, and it kind of comes back to that accountability issue. One of the podcasts that I listen to every once in a while, Tim Cast, he often says that the snowflake doesn't blame itself for the avalanche, and it kind of feels like we have that crisis of accountability all around the country, and it's almost it seems like it's at every level now. It's reached the highest forms of government where they can kind of displace the blame and not take any of the moral responsibility of upholding the oath that they took when they decided to become a border patrol agent. I mean, when you think about what they're actually doing when they're knowingly trafficking kids and women into this country, and they know that they're getting put into sex slavery, it seems that they would have that crisis of conscience to be able to speak up. And I hope that more patriots come forward similar to what you did, and basically taking that stand and saying, this is the line that I'm drawing for myself. I can't go any further than this, and I'm gonna expose what I can. I mean, that's
Yeah, I think
it's
I think a lot of whistleblowers are disillusioned, and it's easy to just feel like a number just overall in society. But I think you're right. Like it's what why do those people not come forward? What are those motivations or what to go forward or not go public, right?
Well, I
yeah,
think
and
I think that we have kind of two problems, right? One is there's a lack of moral responsibility and duty, first and foremost, to the nation. That certainly is there. I mean, I've asked myself many times, why am I the only one that went forward with this information when there were at least hundreds of people that saw the same documents that I did? I've often asked myself that, but then again, you look at an FBI agent. I was a contractor. Yeah, you know, I could lose my job, I could lose my life, I could lose a lot of things. But I think for a lot of FBI agents, probably CIA, and you can speak to this, Pedro, but a lot of these guys have families to take care of, and they got pensions, and the system. They see what happens to guys like me and Pedro, and that are on the inside, and we try to do the right thing, and we get railroaded. So they don't ever see justice. And I'll be honest with you, I've even asked myself. I mean, I believe wholeheartedly that God put me where He put me to do just what I did. There were miraculous things that took place that have convinced me of that, and so I have no doubts. And if faced with that again, I would do it again. But if I didn't have that, if I didn't have that solid 100% faith that God wanted me to do that, I don't know that I would, because when you look and you see out of all these whistleblowers, and there's just 3 of us here tonight, but there are hundreds of whistleblowers that have gone before us, and we can look at them and look what's happened to their lives and see how their lives were destroyed and how there was never any justice, for the people who were actually, having the whistle blown on them, for the corrupt individuals in the government. They were either forced to retire and they got their pension, or nothing happened. In my case, there was no prosecution, no nothing. We're only nothing but damage and suffering for the people who did the right thing, and nothing but
but a clean
basically.
moral conscience And I
Yes.
think that
Yes.
and actually a better future for their children. See, I think one of the things that people fail to understand fully is that by sitting and waiting and not doing anything about it, is that your children are more likely to live harder lives later on down the road, because all of these things have been adding up over years and years, and it's been piling on and on. And I mean, just look at our debt right now, right? We just crossed $35 trillion in debt. We're not borrowing from an imaginary place. We're borrowing from our children and from our children's children. We're taking their wealth to spend it today. And it seems that without people standing up and speaking out about the wrongdoings of what's going on in their department, it is just going to continue going down that pathway, and your children's lives will be harder if you do not speak up now. So yes, there is going to be consequences that are going to be painful. And I mean, thank God you're still here, Nate. And I mean, all of you guys, really. I mean, this is no joke. We have the CIA and you have Facebook. I mean, Facebook is one of the largest social media companies to ever. I guess I could say that it's one of the largest platforms ever created in human history. I mean, Zuckerberg has the reach of any billionaire on earth, right? He's got connections and connections. So, I mean, just having that bravery to speak out. And I mean, you were saying that you were a minimum wage worker, or at least towards the bottom end, and you still felt that compelled feeling to stand up and speak out, which I got to salute you guys for it. And
Thanks. Yeah. And I want to thank you for that, Maurice. And I want to mention real quick, because I have the CIA on the line here. I don't know what you did within the CIA, but that's just fascinating. Because you grow up watching these, everyone grows up glamorizing the CIA, the spy movies and everything, 007. But one specific example I want to mention, since it's current in the news cycle right now, is Venezuela. And when I was at Facebook in 2019, I documented how Facebook actually suppressed an armed revolution. But it was actually the pro-Maduro people that they censored. So, it can go either way. I mean, Facebook has way too much power on whatever side of the aisle you're on, left or right. So I have this post up on my screen and this is in my book, Behind the Mask of Facebook, which you can find a copy of my book online. But basically Facebook says, hey, we know that there's an armed revolution and this is, I think, when Juan Guaido was trying to become president. But Facebook said there's a video in which Valentin Santana, leader of the Colectivo La Piedrita, makes a call to defend the revolution with arms. So they're referring to when they say revolution, they're referring to Maduro's revolution. And so Facebook says, delete all instances of the video depicted below that are supporting Valentin Santana and his message. So, I mean, what more clear evidence can you have of foreign interference than an American company saying, hey, shut down, delete these posts of these people posting? So I wanted to hear from Pedro what your take is on that. Is the CIA directing Facebook to, I mean, they're probably gathering intel from Facebook. Are they telling Facebook what to do in Venezuela?
I couldn't answer that question directly, but I mean, based on some of the materials out there, the Matt Taibbi, the Twitter files, Schellenberger, I believe is his name, and a few others, Mike Bentz. There's been all these oversight boards with government-led government entities being a primary component, a driver, an engine for big tech to do their content moderation. So from that perspective, there could be possibilities where you have CIA, FBI, Department of Homeland Security having some form of say into some of the content moderation that affects not just internal U.S. politics, but potentially foreign politics as well.
Pedro, I'll help you out. I can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah.
I was kind of waiting for that answer. He said it in kind of a slick way, though.
There is so much, stuff that goes on, and considering the CIA's mission, I would have, and I was never with the CIA, so it's pure speculation on my part. But I would not be surprised at all, if the U.S. government was directing those types of actions. And to what Pedro was saying, We know for a fact that the FBI was paying $9 million to have access to be able to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story. That's out. So you had, and it was the
And
interesting thing
where did they
about
get that money from exactly?
the U.S. tax
Yeah,
dollars.
yeah, my tax
So
dollars.
we paid to have our
That's right.
information censored.
You know how they're able to do that? Because of a change that occurred to the Frank Muntz the Frank Munt Modernization Act is what changed that. Prior to the Modernization Act, when they changed it, the federal government was not authorized to basically pay for propaganda activities against American citizens, but that changed. So these are things where I have to wonder. And this is, I'm curious, be curious to hear your thoughts on this, Pedro. But when I look at all the things that I know that the government could do, like enforcing Section 230, like defunding some of the activities of the FBI, especially with regards to Section 702 and FISA abuse. There's been hundreds of thousands of Americans spied on illegally, and that has come out through the courts. Yet no one's gone to jail. You don't see any defunding of some of these activities by Congress. You don't see any changes made where these changes need to be made. And these hearings, they seem to all lead to nothing except for talking points for their next election bid.
Hey, but we do get clips. We do get viral clips and strongly worded letters, especially from Republicans.
Yeah,
that's right.
Let me.
So I have to wonder how many of these people in Congress, in the courts, maybe even executives of companies like Facebook, how many of these people are currently being blackmailed right now by the deep state? Because I know the surveillance tools and techniques that I can't get into the details of. I know what the capabilities are, and I'm telling you, with the restrictions that were removed after Obama, when he left office, he made a whole bunch of changes that removed certain restrictions on the passing of masked information. And with all of that and the types of capabilities that we have, it is absolutely possible that that most of these guys in Congress and most of these judges that are on the federal bench are being surveilled and have blackmail dirt on them. I would not be surprised. And so, but my concern is that the reason we don't see anything happen is because they're already owned. They're already being blackmailed, or on the opposite side, they're being bribed. They're getting paid, like in the case of Twitter getting paid money from the FBI to give them that kind of access. I think there's that going on too. So there's some people being paid.
Do we have any changes that you'd want to see, Pedro, that like enacted that actually could help fix this process and this kind of corruption that's been building up for a long time? Especially, I mean, let's just talk about whistleblowers in general. Do you see any pathway forward that can help correct a way for whistleblowers to be able to actually feel a little bit safer when they come out?
Well, let me see if I can address Nate's comments, concerns, and answer your question at the same time. Well, basically, one way to look at this is if a congressman or a executive leader in the government with power to do anything about some of these abuses of government power decides to do so, their actions to do so is essentially almost turning them into like a whistleblower. Like they're blowing the whistle on this corrupt government entity. They're blowing the whistle on the abuse of government power, and they're trying to fix it. I mean, we have some congressmen who are trying to do some things. Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, for example. But they are basically limited in their ability to do anything because most of the other congressmen are just playing along. They rather have their nice talking points. They rather have their nice, press conference. Their
viral moments.
They don't do anything at all to defund, limit funding, shut down certain operations. I mean, you got to realize that the appropriations is handled by the House of Representatives.
That's right.
The House of Representatives has the constitutional power to rein in the executive branch. They have the ability to defund any function of the executive branch that they deem to be outside the boundaries of the Constitution, or if it has exceeded the powers that they originally had. But we don't see any instances of any congressman doing anything to defund some of these government abuses. And consequently, we got to ask why. And part of it is, yeah, they may be blackmailed, they may be compromised, but the reality is they would be an outlier. They would be like a whistleblower, and that can cause them to be blackballed, diminished, kicked out of
committees.
Committees, yeah, not receive funds for reelection, or have
That's a very good point.
Contenders who will challenge them in the primaries with heavy funding from party insiders. So it goes back to, how do we fix this whistleblower problem? It starts with Congress. If Congress doesn't have the will to fix it, it'll never be fixed. Congress has the lever of funding again. All they have to do is, should a whistleblower allege reprisal, Congress could very well go to the corresponding inspector general and tell the inspector general, you will immediately investigate fully this alleged reprisals. If you don't, we will strip you of funding and you will have no funding for select IG operations. Believe me, that would motivate the IG to jump on an investigation and to do it right. And the reason why the IGs don't do whistleblower reprisal investigations, because it's really not what they're designed to do. They're designed to do three functions. One of them is audits, financial audits. The other one is what's called evaluations, to evaluate whether agencies are meeting the law, whether they're functioning efficiently and effectively. And a third aspect is doing investigations. But the investigations are geared towards recovery of funds, finding money that either got lost, got stolen, got defrauded. So the IG has really no interest to do a reprisal investigation, take investigators or inspectors out of their core duties to do something that can generate a liability for an IG. So that's part of the problem. The other part,
they have no prosecutorial power either. So criminal investigations by them, all they can do is refer it to the FBI for further investigation. And if the FBI is the problem, and those intelligence community groups protect one another, so they're not gonna do anything that's gonna harm one of the other agencies.
So one of the fastest ways to get results, what you're saying is to, I guess, vote this November vote in American First Patriots, because there's already ways for them to get this done. We just don't have the representatives actually strong enough to stand up for it.
Well, the voting process, we are in primary season. On June 18, Oklahoma, where I live here, we had our primary for Congressional District 1. I tallied up the turnout. Only 15% of registered Republicans voters showed up to vote in the first Congressional District primary. Step back another week. South Carolina had their primary a week earlier. The entire state, the voter turnout for that primary was like 13.5%. I just spoke with somebody today from Illinois, and they were telling me that their turnout was like 12%. In these primaries, if people don't go out and vote, we're never going to fix this problem by having the best candidates to win a political office.
Yeah, that's true, because they're not even going to be able to reach the initial ballot, because they'll get, basically it comes down to whoever could pay for people to show up. Now, I know that it's not like a direct correlation, but I mean, pay the people they know will go out and vote for them and get them inspired to go vote for them, right? So, because 15%, I mean, that's nothing. That can be beaten by a moderate amount of participation on the other side. That's insane.
I live in what I call the marijuana state. In 2018, Oklahoma had a referendum on medicinal marijuana. And it was a primary in which essentially what happened is the pro-marijuana people outvoted the ones who didn't want medicinal marijuana. So we now have marijuana cannabis store everywhere. We have over 2,400 dispensaries in Oklahoma, the number one state in the nation with marijuana dispensaries, 2,400. And that happened because people did not go out and vote during that particularly off-cycle election.
You know, I participate in more of the culture war for the most part, right? And trying to understand exactly what's going on, because I think was it Breitbart who had said that politics is downstream from culture, right? And with a lot of the canceling that's been going on, I know that after the attempted assassination on Trump, there were a lot of left-leaning people who basically called for, or were celebrating, I guess, cheering on the shooter and saying that he shouldn't have missed, right? And there was this back and forth happening online, and where people really had a conflict with actually canceling the people on the left who had called for that. And a lot of the response that I've been getting from those people is basically saying that turning the other cheek is what got us to this point. But what I'm hearing from you and what I've been putting together as of late is that turning the other cheek is not what got us to this point. It's been the lack of participation by patriots. It's been the neglect to participate in your civic duty, in at least showing up to vote. Trump literally went out there and took a bullet for you. The least you can do is go vote, and vote in the primary, and then go out and vote in the general election. It is so hard. Like, we're going to be working backwards if we continue to take this approach of nobody really participates and then everybody gets the results they expected, because it's going to be a lot easier to say that the Democrats cheated if nobody out from the right shows up and votes. And it's just going to feed into that narrative. So basically, we need to inspire people to actually vote, because we've gotten to this point simply because there has been a lack of participation and a lack of people standing up and actually taking part in what you owe to your country.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement for the populace to go out and get involved. And I think culturally as well, I think it's a matter of, like, I live in the Phoenix metro area, and I feel like in big cities we don't really talk to our neighbors. Like, I think it's a symptom of societal decay when you can't have a conversation with your neighbors in a big city, or you just don't talk about politics, or maybe people feel afraid to talk about politics because it's so divisive. But yeah, these are all strategies that are being used against us to disillusion us or discourage us from voting, because maybe people, with everything going on, maybe they feel like their vote doesn't count because they've seen all the evidence of election fraud. So yeah, I think as a society, just we should be able to talk to our neighbors openly about this and have a conversation. But I think you're right. I think the solution is going to, show up to vote, get involved. And then, but the flip side is, like, a lot of people say, okay, well, there's election fraud. They keep on doing this election fraud. So, like, what's the next step? Should we just, because we don't want to go down the road of violence, but it's like,
exactly. We got to show up first. That's the first thing, because like I was saying, if we don't show up and actually vote, it will feed into that narrative that even if the Democrats did, like, mild cheating and, like, barely were able to win, everybody will still think that the entire system is completely broken. And I mean, there are ways to fix this without us going completely down the toilet. It's just that we have to start getting involved. It has to be more than a tweet on X. It has to be more than a YouTube video here and there. You actually have to make sure your mom, your sister, your neighbor is registered to vote and actually have a plan. This is one of the most simple ways, and it's peaceful. That's the beauty of it. I mean, really, before we get down a violent road, because if you look throughout history right now, America has been experiencing civil strife, and there are bad people in this country who really wish to see our country fall. But I would rather have patriots stand up and participate in the voting system than wait until everything crumbles around us. That's the scariest thing to me, is that we go into something like a full-blown civil war. Nobody should want that, because nobody understands what that actually means. I don't even understand what it means. I just know it's not going to be, I know it's not going to be good, because I've studied history. I understand what actually happens to countries. And I mean, on a scale that we have and the technology that we have today, it is going to be very, very difficult to predict exactly what's going on. Yes, Woody, that is a good site to go to. If you guys aren't registered to vote, or your mom's not registered to vote, or your stepdad's not registered to vote, or your uncle isn't, go to voteforamerica.com, get them registered, and then just have a plan. This is step one. This is the system we were born into. Let's work on trying to fix it in a peaceful way, at least by showing up.
Absolutely. Step one is vote. You're not registered, register. I mean, yeah, there are electoral issues, integrity issues, fraud, fraudulent ballots, broken machines, machines possibly tainted, so forth. But, if people are not voting, we'll never find out about these problems. One of the reasons why we found out about the problems in 2020 is because we really did have potentially a red wave that got canceled out. It's quite possible that we may have had a red wave in 2022 in some places and may have been canceled out as well through some fraud based on particularly what Dennis D'Souza put out about the ballot harvesting. But
was that 2,000 mules?
The first step is vote. Is the only way we're going to try to course correct. And we must vote intelligently, though. Let's not just vote straight Republican because we believe that every Republican is a good Republican, because we're not. I mean, I can give you an example. In 2022 here in Oklahoma, we had a challenger for Senator Langford, a strong contender, challenged him in the primary. It was a pastor, Jackson Lawmeyer, great man. He had a great vision, a great plan, and he would have made a great senator. But, a lack of voter turnout in June 2022 tanked his candidacy. He ended up basically losing by 70 to 20 something. So, I mean, he basically was, trounced. But again, turnout was low, so that didn't help him.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example. I lost my primary to a guy who is the former vice president of the Podesta Group, and who was a former, foreign registered agent for multiple countries that are not our friends, and spent, most of his career as a lobbyist. And we had, I think, 30% or 29% voter turnout here in the Republican primary. But with West Virginia being a very solid red state, the primary is everything. That is basically probably more powerful than the general election, but yet people don't show. Interestingly enough, the people who do show, 85% of the people who show up and vote in the primary are over age 55. So that means all your people who are working, who are paying the
This
taxes.
is my generation's fault.
That's right. That's
not
mine
doing
too,
anything.
by the way. That's mine too, by the way. So it's really sad seeing that, but it is important. And I would also stress that something that Pedro mentioned is that we need people to be intelligent voters. It's not enough to just vote straight party ticket. You need to actually read up and get to know. Look, how hard is it? We're talking about a handful of candidates that are running, but you need to know who you're voting for on your state legislature. You need to know who you're voting for when it comes to your DA. Remember how George Soros went around and funded the campaigns of all these DAs? You can't just look at the stuff that's coming in the mail and make your decision based off that, because the stuff that comes in the mail, those are the people who have all the deep state money that are going into their campaigns. The fact is all the guys that are doing the heavy commercials and stuff like that, that's because they've got money. And oftentimes they weed out the guys that are not going to be yes men during the primary. That's how they get rid of them. They get rid of them by outspending them, because they know that people are going to vote on the basis of whatever they see, not necessarily on the basis of what they know. And that's the sad truth and reality. So we've got to do a better job of educating people about that and getting that across. I think it starts in school. I think it starts in, in our education with, kids when they're young. I know that my father ingrained in me the importance of voting. He used to take me into the voting booth with him. And so all my life, growing up until I was 18, I would, that was like a rite of passage. I wanted to go vote. I was so excited the first time that I went and voted. But a lot of people don't have that. And, and so that's something that we need to be doing, what we can to change that culturally in our nation. On the other side of that, though, in terms of, whistleblower protection and what can we do to change things? We've got to convince these members of Congress to make those necessary changes. And I think part of the problem is that whistleblowers up until recently have not been very well organized. The only whistleblowers that were organized were far leftists. And so there's a couple of whistleblowing groups and organizations out there, but the ones that, that have been out there for some time are ones that are ran, by those on the left. And they didn't give a crap about, me blowing the whistle on Hillary Clinton. They certainly weren't going to defend me. And so we need true nonpartisan groups, that are willing to support whistleblowers on the basis of the fact that whistleblowers are the last line of defense that we have against corruption in our government. Think about it. The world that Pedro lived in within the CIA. Do you think anybody's going to know what the CIA is doing? No, it's all cloaked behind classification. Same thing within the FBI. They're part of the intelligence community. Nobody knows and has access to see the documents that I saw. And so it's
the same thing with giant social media groups like
exactly.
Facebook, because that's all behind the scenes work.
Yep, and that's another point that I was just getting ready to say is within this. No, it's all right. Within the social media, though, think about it. It's not just social media, but it's also the mainstream media too. They're all controlled and manipulated, and they're controlling and manipulating, the narrative. And while that may not be illegal, when the government's involved, it should be. So why? And if the government's involved, we should be able to actually, see everything that the government's doing in communications with, big tech. They should not be able to do anything with private corporations that we don't know about.
Yeah, it should be a fishbowl. A funny anecdote. This is really random. In 2011, I worked at. I was Santa's manager at the mall. You go to the mall and there's Santa there, like talking to kids. I was Santa's boss, and so the reason I bring that up is because we were trained to be like a fishbowl. Like when you work at Disney, you're in a fishbowl. You're always in the public's eye, right? So everything you do is visible because you're in the middle of the mall, right? And everyone's looking at you. So that's how government and Facebook should be. It should be a fishbowl. Everybody in the public should be able to see what's going on. And I think there's a big push towards transparency and decentralization, like with blockchain or crypto. You can see every single transaction. You don't know the person's address, but you see exactly what's going on. And so as far as solutions go, I like the private, kind of like the private groups or organizations that go help people, like Project Veritas. And so I was blessed to be able to I was one of the first insiders to go public with them. And since then, they really, since 2020, more than 16 whistleblowers went forward. So I've been blessed to be part of that network of community and have that support. And so we were incentive, some part of the incentive there, and it's not a bad thing is, hey, if you go people saw, hey, if you go public, there's going to be a give, send, go. They're going to raise funds for you. And I didn't. And so that's, and some of these people, they did a fundraiser and got like $100,000. And so a lot of those disincentives from going public are washed away by, hey, I'm going to go public with Veritas and get this incentive, get some
that's
support.
really interesting. It's like crowdsourcing the truth, it's not an incentive to lie about it, but it is definitely an incentive as like a security net for the people whistleblowing, because regardless of whatever you're whistleblowing on, you're going to receive backlash. So just the fact that there's a lot of patriots out there, shout out to James O'Keefe. He does amazing work. And being able to expose something like that and then have a safety net for whistleblowers And this is not, this doesn't need to be regulated by Congress. It literally was started by James O'Keefe, who is just another guy who decided to start really digging his heels in and exposing corruption. And it just so happens that now he has a ton of connections where you can have that safety net if you're a whistleblower, as long as you reach out to him, which is absolutely incredible. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and I just want to mention before Pedro continues, I just want to mention some of the names of the other whistleblowers, because I'm here and not everybody's. Maybe we can have another one with all these whistleblowers, but Zach Voorhees was the Google whistleblower, Eric Cochran with Pinterest, Melissa McAtee with Pfizer, David Johnson Hasbro, Carrie Ports with CNN, Ivory Hecker with Fox News, Debbie Bernal with Pfizer as well, Gene Stagg with in Louisiana, Tara Rodas with HHS, Jody O'Malley, a nurse whistleblower, Cassandra Spencer with Facebook as well, April Moss, and Aaron Stevenson, Kyle Seraphin. These are all people who've been associated with us with James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, and they've all. I mean, we talk a lot. Like, it's great to have kind of a support group, and we've done a lot of good. So these keep. It's good for people to keep on coming forward and have that support. But, sorry, go ahead, Pedro.
These private groups do pose a challenge. What I have found is that it depends which sector you work in as far as your ability to report to some of these private groups. Like in the intelligence community, you can't. If that would be leaking, and you can find yourself prosecuted and going to jail. But where I'm going with this comment is, a lot of times with these private groups, these activist groups, Nate was right. There's a lot of them on the left, but you do have some on the right. What I have found is that both on the right, on the left, they typically will use a whistleblower to make a name for their organization as a means to fundraise, put a pretty email out, or do the standard political theater, showmanship, and grandstanding that Congress does for them, basically say, we're doing something about it. If you're not blowing the whistle on something ultra sexy like the Facebook stuff, the reality is you're not going to find any help from a lot of these groups. You have to literally blow the whistle on something that they can use for their own benefit, and only then can you get their backing, and they will help you through their networks for you to give a give, send, go, or some kind of donation funding stream so that you can be well taken care of.
That brings up a very good point in terms of a challenge that we face within the intelligence community, and I would even include the DoD in any area where there's classified information. You're right. If somebody comes forward with classified information and they go public with it, they're considered a leaker, not a whistleblower. And perfect example of that is Edward Snowden. What he exposed in terms of PRISM. There's a lot of people who would agree that was absolutely necessary for the public to know about and Congress to know about. But the way that in which he did it, he basically kind of boxed him into a hole. And within the intelligence community, it's very, very difficult to blow the whistle. I mean, you've heard from me the lengths that I had to go to protect myself. One of the things that could help, if we're talking about solutions, I think there needs to be funding for outside counsel for anybody who's going to blow the whistle, who's part of the federal government, whether they are whether they are a contractor or a federal employee. If they're dealing with classified information, there's only certain lawyers that can even deal with that kind of stuff. And I do think that they need legal counsel. My legal bills, by the way, came to almost $200,000. Now, if I had not had miraculously had a woman who was willing to, come to my aid and put up $200,000 and put it in an escrow account to cover my legal bills, I probably would not be talking to you right now. I'd probably be in some jail cell, or I would have, had to flee the country or something like, Snowden did. For me, because I had the advantage of seeing what happened to Snowden when he went and leaked information to the public. There were several people that did that, right before I decided to blow the whistle. So that's why I was damn careful about how I did it. But I'll be honest, a lot of it was, I was praying and asking God to, carefully guide me through that process. And I think he did, but it is a scary thing. And so I do think that legal representation is needed. And the problem is that you're talking about legal representation that's not funded or not controlled by the agency that you're blowing the whistle on. I think that's important.
And the legal community within the national security field is dominated by a set of lawyers that tend to be very liberal, and they're not very supportive of conservatives. So that does not help.
That is true.
Yeah,
Although
I just think overall in society, I mean, the government's a big part of our life. I wish we could just get rid of it. And I'll just play devil's advocate here because we've advocated for some like very pro like government things like you just show up and vote. Traditional things, show up and vote, guys. Let's and like let's work in the existing systems. Let's fix Congress. But like I feel like part of me just wants to like I don't know how realistic it is, but just abolish it. Can we just abolish the government? Like, right? Can we just like create our own states?
That would be declaring independence, and that's what the founding fathers did, which would probably cause another revolutionary war. But it's just that. But I mean, if you want to write,
is best. I think Ronald Reagan said that the government's least is the best government. And the reality is that we need to do basically a deep dive accounting of, okay, what really are the essential government functions that we need and what is it that we do not need? And just start putting across the board like Javier Milei in Argentina, afuera, like he's shutting down all entire government departments that really are a waste of the taxpayers' money.
Yeah, it's definitely harder to have a revolution with 300 million people versus like a million, like going back to the 1700s.
Yeah. And I mean, especially with the technology and everything nowadays it will be a lot more difficult in that way.
And I want to remind folks, don't discount the power of your state legislature. The state legislature controls the elections. But how many people actually know who their representative or who their state senator is? Most people have no idea. They know who their congressman is, but they don't know who the one person that, I saw a comment in here. I'll put this up here about they reached out they got as far as their congressman and they never heard back and, shut right up after that. Well, here's the thing. A congressman deals with, about 700 and something thousand people that they represent. A state representative, you're talking about somebody that is going to be easier to hold accountable. The weird part is because the federal representatives get more attention. Their races, cost more money and all of that. People generally know who they are because they see the advertisements that come in the mail and all of that. They don't know who their state representatives are because they don't have the money for that sort of, spending. They don't see it, or they may not know who their county officials are, or even what their county officials do. They may not know, what half of these positions that are out there actually do. And so we've got to change that because I think the closer a person is to home, the easier it is to actually have an impact. And like I said, when it comes to certain things, anything basically that's not spelled out in the Constitution that the federal government's supposed to be doing, it's supposed to fall to the states. And then if it's not outlined in the state constitution, it's supposed to fall to us. So enumerated powers, folks, we need to get power taken away from the federal government and put back to our states where we actually can have an impact and can have a say.
It's really good to participate in the discussion of federal politics. I know that most people are a fan of that as opposed to their local politics because I know that personally when I post about local politics, nobody cares. Nobody likes it. Nobody shares it. And I got 100 and some odd thousand followers now on X. And if I post something about my local politics, it goes nowhere. So I understand the feeling of why people feel discouraged to do it. But one of the main things that I try to inspire people to do, or at least understand, is that if we want to change the country, it's going to end up like we've been circling all the way down and kind of coming back around to the state, to, you know, to your representative, and then it comes back down to you, whether you're going to go and vote. And, you know, if you want to see the change in the world, then you have to embody those values, and you actually have to understand your responsibility. And especially if you were to be a whistleblower like you three, you actually have to have that sense of patriotic duty to propel yourself forward and stand out against the crowd. And not only that, if you let yourself go and you allow all of these things to happen because you're not doing anything about it, then I mean that there's millions of others that feel that same way, and it's how we've gotten to this point. It's just been a decay of society in general, and the only way to fix it is to start with you. And with you three in particular being the whistleblowers that you are, you literally, I mean, you embodied that value and decided that you were going to take the first step. Like Nate said, right as soon as we started this podcast off, you know, why not me? And I mean, I would ask that to all the viewers right now. Why not you? Why can't it be you who either speaks out or at least embody the values that you wish to see in the world? And I really hope that people will take that to heart. And I know that this podcast has been running a little bit longer, so I mean, this has been fun. I would like to do this again, and be able to go a little bit more in depth into your stories. But before we close this out, I would like you guys to all get a chance. I know that you held up a book, both of you guys did, in that you had written yourself, and hopefully these books can help inspire people. So I know that I have a bunch of reading followers. So Pedro, let's hear it. What's that book again? And where can they find it?
The Broken Whistle, A Deep State Run Amok. The best place to get it is actually Amazon Prime. The paperback book will get to you in 2 days. Right now, they do have some hardbacks available. It's a hardback without a dust jacket, and it's also available within a few days. So you can get a paperback or hardback from Amazon. And there's ebook as well. If you want a different type of format, visit www.brokenwhistlebook.com, and there I have links to a traditional hardback with a dust jacket through Ingram Sparks, and there's also availability with Barnes & Noble Nook, Kobo, and Apple Books, as well as the Amazon Kindle.
Beautiful. And Ryan?
Yeah, so this is Behind the Mask of Facebook, and it's 300 pages, so it's a good read, and it's analysis of Facebook's practices and policies. So you can find it on Amazon as well, also with the publisher Skyhorse Publishing. My co-author Ken Heckenlively has actually written a lot of books about the COVID vaccine, and the book is endorsed by Patrick Byrne. But yeah, Behind the Mask of Facebook, it's on pretty much every Barnes & Noble as well. But yeah, it's a great read. Encourage you to look.
He's on Audible as well?
It's not on Audible. I don't have an audio version yet. I'm working on that.
Okay.
But yeah, Behind the Mask of Facebook, and I'm working on another book right now with a cop whistleblower who's exposing cops who were child predators. So in Maryland, but yeah, no, wow. Thank you so much for the time here. I think overall the message is like, everyone, I think that's the biggest message is locally, everyone needs to, make sure your family's voting, get involved in local politics. But yeah, it's just such an honor to be here once again.
Uh-oh, you're muted.
All politics is local. Speaker Tip O'Neill from the 1970s and 80s. It's a very famous politician, Speaker of the House, a Democrat that worked very closely with Ronald Reagan back in the days when Democrats and Republicans would work together. All politics is local. And to go back to what General Flynn says, basically, local action has national impact.
Yep. But thank you again. Can you guys hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Thanks again for having me. I think, the biggest thing is just, if you see something, say something, and there's a great community to support you. But yeah, thanks again for your time today.
Absolutely. And Nate?
I have no book. I have no intention of writing any book anytime soon. I don't think it would get released through pre-publication review by both FBI and NSA anyways. But I will say this. I've talked a lot about everything that has gone on. I've done some very lengthy interviews, and folks can go to theraisingcainshow.com. I'm in the process of getting that page turned over, basically my old campaign page turned over to that. So all the videos and interviews that I did where I went in very much into depth into my entire whistleblower story can be found there under the media section. And within the next, I would say by the end of this week, our new website, theraisingcainshow.com, will be up. If you go to it now, it takes you to my old campaign site, but you can go to the media section there. And and follow me on the Patriots Prayer. I'm on at Tuesday at 6 p.m. I do a show about state politics of West Virginia, and I also cover some issues related to Appalachia in general. But on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, and on Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, I do the show on it's on national issues, national security, cybersecurity, election integrity, those types of topics. America First, Patriot topics. I also am on a show. I have a talk radio show that I'm a host on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. live. I'm on with America Out Loud, which is live. Or it's not live, I should say. It's a pre-record, but it's on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. And I go over, it's called Unleashed, the Political News Hour. And if you guys go to AmericaOutloud.news, you can find out about that show and when I'm on there. And they a week after they do it live, or a week after they broadcast, the show is up available to listen to. And that show is more of kind of like a monologue on political news and stuff that goes on. So that's where you guys can follow me. And you can also follow me on my social media at Nate Cain for WV. That's NATECAIN, 4 WV.
Wonderful. Well, I would like to thank all of you gentlemen, and on National Whistleblower Appreciation Day, I want to let you know that you guys are definitely appreciated, and I hope that more people are inspired to embody the values that you guys showed in the bravery and courage it took to become a whistleblower and actually speak the truth. Our founding fathers said, "Give us liberty or give me death," and I think that you guys actually embodied that in your courage to speak out and to stand out from the crowd regardless of the consequences. So like I said, if I had a hat, I'd have it off to you. So God bless you guys. Everybody, thank you for watching this. I know this was a kind of an odd time for me to host the Patriots Prayer podcast. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you can, please share it with your friends. Other than that, God bless you guys. God bless America. And thank you again, gents, for coming on. Take care.
Thanks.
Trading good for evil and evil for good.
This is the Patriots Prayer podcast. It's a tremendous show, one of the greatest shows in the history of the world.
This is Bryson Gray, and you are watching the Patriots Prayer.
Say, gather the faith.